Hello, I'm Jason Skill. This is Painting with Skill Lesson 2. In this lesson I want to look at your first paintbrush. Which paintbrush should you choose if you're wanting to follow the lessons in sequence and find it quite easy to do the exercises? Now, when I first started painting, I had first brush that I had for watercolour was a very small tiny brush that came with a little pan set. Something like this. Now you may have something like that in your possession, and it's great. Normally it's a nice little brush, you get a reasonable point on it, and because it's tiny you can control it with a reasonable amount of ease to be able to paint detail. So here I've just done what would look like, say, a little tree. But with a brush the size that I'm recommending, which is a size 12 or something in that area, size 10, 12, 14, whatever you can find, it isn't critical. You'll find that when you get it and it's new, then it should also be able to paint detail. If you notice here, I'm being able to paint small little branches without any real fuss, just like I did with the tiny brush. Just because a brush is bigger doesn't mean that you can't do detail. Now the brush that I would recommend is a polyester and sable mixture brush. Now the reason I would recommend a polyester and sable mix, and they're sometimes referred to as just mixture brushes, is that the polyester has a lot of spring to it, a lot of bounce, like kind of a nylon, and basically it's when you press the brush down it will normally return. So if you're buying nylon brushes, for example, for acrylic and oil, you'd find that they're very, very strong, firm brushes, an alternative to hog hair. And the polyester is a little bit more fine than that, but still has a lot of strength to it. The sable hair, normally they'll mix perhaps not the greatest quality sable in the world with these brushes, is very good at carrying the water. It's very good at holding globules of water between the hairs. The reason it does that, if I draw you a little diagram, is that the polyester or nylon is basically the same width until it gets to the end, and then it will perhaps thin. Same width, then gets to the end and then thins. But between the hairs there's a similar gap, and there's no stop points, shall we say, that or breaking points that may take the water that's in the brush and stop it from flowing out easily. So if you're using a nylon brush, what you sometimes find is you fill it with paint and water, and then when you place it on the paper, quite a lot of it comes out. Whereas if you're using a sable brush or a mixture with sable and nylon or sable and polyester, it will flow out more slowly. The reason for that is that the natural haired brushes have a belly point in every hair. It naturally grows with a belly to each of the hairs. So the hairs, unlike the man-made fibre, isn't uniform. And this lack of uniformity means that when I draw the little globules of water this time round, you can see that at this point here there's a slowing. The gaps between the hairs become more narrow, and therefore the water doesn't escape as fast. It also will suck up the paint. Quite interestingly, that if I wash this brush through water, pull out the moisture, I'm just sort of teasing out the water there, so it should be quite dry. I might even dry it on some kitchen towel. Now if I place it into this section here, watch how some of this basically goes up into the brush by just placing it into it. It almost goes into the brush, right? Now it doesn't do that as much with a nylon brush. It's it's almost like a capillary reaction that happens with the natural hair. So you'll find that natural hair brushes will actually suck up the paint, and they will also deliver it more smoothly. But the cost of, say, a full sable brush, particularly a Kolinsky sable brush, which is the Rolls-Royce end of brushes, is really rather expensive. So to reduce the cost, but to mimic the feel of a Kolinsky, which is very good at water carrying, paint carrying, but also has bounce and spring, this mixture of polyester and natural hair of sable is ideal when you're starting, because it keeps the budget down, it keeps the cost down of buying the brush, and yet you're getting the same feel that you would get with a much more expensive Kolinsky sable. Okay. Now let's look at that tiny brush that you first started looking at here, and let's make a square there, and I'm going to put another square underneath it of a similar size with a little brush. And then I'm going to, first of all, I'm just going to make some more paint here, because obviously this has sucked some of it up and then I've washed it out. So this is just French ultramarine. I'm rubbing the top of the palette, rub the paint, let it drain down into the base, make a wash. So now I've got some paint. What I'm going to do is see how long it takes me to cover this area. This is just a hard cartridge paper. It's nothing fancy, not watercolour paper. What I'm going to do, I'm not after some perfect flat wash. I'm just seeing how many strokes of the brush does it take to cover this area. Not many. Let's do the same thing with the little brush. And how many times do I have to go back to the palette? Now, I've watched an awful lot of videos online over the years of people painting. It often occurs to me how much hard work it seems to be for some people painting because they insist on using a tiny brush. Maybe it's a work thing. Maybe they want it to feel like it's sort of hard work and earnestly they need to put the hours in to make it a true work of art. But actually, it just takes longer. I'm still going. I'm really quite bored now, getting from A to B. It's taken me 3-4 times as long to cover the same area. So if you're painting, think how much faster I'm going to be able to paint than you if all you've got is this one. Increasing the brush size will increase your confidence because you're daring to make different strokes, and it will also enable you to paint more fluently and slightly faster. We'll be looking at a whole series of marks that you will be doing with this larger brush in subsequent videos. But just to give you a bit of a sneak preview, let's have a look at the fact that you can go from thick to thin, that you may see it as a printing tool, that you may enjoy doing kind of graphic marks. You might be able to do little printing marks. We could take the moisture down, just rubbing the excess off there, and maybe make little dry brush marks. We could make kind of dragging marks. I could reduce the moisture level. And let's rub that over here. Some dry brush marks. There's so many things that you can do with a brush. It's like learning kind of a language when you're first becoming more skilled with using a brush. Instead of thinking of something like I did with those squares, where you basically draw a shape and then fill it in like it's a pencil kind of thinking, the brush is basically hair on the end of a stick. It can do all sorts of different things. It can adopt shapes and do things that a pencil never could. And it's taking advantage of what that brush can do that we'll be looking at in some of the first lessons. So, just to remind you, size 12, polyester and sable. That's what you're looking for.